Okay. This video is 6 months overdue, but we've actually been trying to make this video for the last month. This is our 4th time sitting down trying to film this. We had a lot of mishaps. The camera battery kept dying. The sun went down and got dark on us. It's been a hot mess. But I have my notes to remind us what to say, and we're gonna get through this. And we're excited to share. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being interested. Here we go. Okay. Let me start off by saying this. This is our birth story. We're just going to share honestly what we wanted to happen, what actually happened, what our opinions, feelings, thoughts are, and we're not judging anybody who had a C-section, got induced, had an epidural, had a home birth. Whatever you did to get your baby into the world is amazing. So please don't take anything we say out of context. We're just sharing our hearts, where we were at, and that's all. Am I using my hands enough? Okay. Let me read my notes.
Yeah, just read your note before you start,
Okay.
and then you can talk about it. And we can cut it all together.
Our ideal plan. That's what we're going to talk about. Ideally, this is what our birth was going to look like. I was going to labor at home until I was basically about to push. We live a mile from the hospital, so I was hoping to just stay here as long as we could. We had hired a doula, and so she was going to be here with us and help us labor. Brandon studied up on tons of techniques on how to help me and how to just be an amazing labor partner. And so, yeah, that was the plan. Stay here as long as we could, go to the hospital, push Monroe out, stay for 24 hours maximum, because that's the minimum time that they let you stay. And I wanted to be in the hospital the least amount of time as possible. And we wanted to do it naturally. So I did not want any, what do they call it?
You didn't
Interventions. I did not want any interventions.
want drugs. We didn't want no drugs.
No, I don't want no. Okay, anyways, I'm gonna lose my battery if I keep messing around. Okay, we wanted to do everything naturally. So that was the goal. Honestly, I was considering doing a home birth, but it was a lot more expensive, like over double the price to do a home birth than the hospital, because we have really good insurance. So that's why I didn't go that route, but next time it might be worth it. Anyways, okay, rolling it back to January. Our due date, a due date is just a guesstimate. Our due date was January 12th, and starting at about 39 weeks pregnant, the doctors were kind of asking me if I was interested in getting induced, what my thoughts were on that, and I kind of told them from the beginning that I really didn't want to get induced, that I knew most first-time moms went 41 and 1, which is 8 days past the due date, so I was totally fine waiting, and I just wasn't interested in the induction talk. So they didn't really push that yet. They did start mentioning it earlier on, but once we hit 40 weeks, they really started not being aggressive about it, but just kind of telling us the risk of waiting past 40 weeks, and just kind of started to get into our head a little bit. So we really were fine. Like, we weren't nervous about being overdue or anything. I genuinely expected to have her 8 days past my due date. I don't know why. I just was expecting her to be late. So 41 weeks rolls around, and there was nothing. I wasn't dilated. I wasn't feeling any Braxton Hicks or any contractions, and I felt the same as I had. And this whole pregnancy, I felt really good. Like, I was able to go on hikes and go swim and kind of do my normal life. So even up until 40 weeks, 41 weeks, 42 weeks, I was feeling really good. So about 41, is this making sense?
Yeah, you're just cruising.
I know, I'm trying to do it fast so our battery doesn't die. So at like 41 weeks, 5 days overdue, we had a doctor's appointment and they checked my fluid levels. I guess with an ultrasound or something. I'm not really sure, but they told us, the nurse was kind of dramatic about it, and she's like, your levels are extremely low, like you might need to go to the hospital tonight to get induced, which of course that freaked us out because that's not what we wanted, and I was feeling fine. I didn't feel any different, and so I kind of got nervous about that. And so the doctor came in and was much less dramatic and basically said, you don't have to go in tonight to get induced, but this was on a Wednesday. She's like, I do not suggest waiting past the weekend, which over the weekend I would be 42 weeks. So she really was asking me to come get induced before 42 weeks. So we kind of just left the hospital or the doctor's office, and I was defeated. I don't know how you felt. How did you feel?
Yeah, I guess it was just kind of, we just like hadn't had any complications or anything the whole time, so it was just kind of weird.
Yeah, I was
'Cause
totally
we were just like,
healthy.
yeah, we were totally fine to keep waiting, and obviously we knew that the doctors didn't want us to keep waiting, but it was just, that appointment was just weird because that one nurse was like, kind of scared us a little bit. I don't know if that was like her intention or if she was being genuine, but she was just kind of like, oh my gosh, your fluids are so low. So then we're like, okay, well obviously we want to do it natural, but then you kind of have the dilemma of, obviously we don't want to, like, if it's going to put Monroe in danger or Kendra in danger, we're obviously not going to do anything that does that.
Yeah.
But we really didn't want to get induced. So yeah, it was kind of a frustrating appointment, and then it kind of like forced us to make a decision.
Yeah, so they had said all that, and then asked me to call them back that day or the next day to schedule getting induced, which I didn't call them back. And then they kept calling me, and I was purposely ignoring their calls because I kept getting scared. But then I would pretend like I missed it. I was like, oh crap, I missed the hospital's call. Anyway, so Brandon and I discussed it, and basically we just said, okay, by Friday night I'll be 42 weeks. If I haven't gone into labor, then we will go to the hospital and get induced. So Friday came along, we went to the beach, I went for a swim, I was out there for a long time, we were going on walks, and I mean, we were doing, like, it's not like we were just sitting around lollygagging this whole time. Like, the entire time I was overdue, I was doing everything, like drinking all the tea and doing all the squats, and I even used a breast pump at one point because I heard that can start contractions. And I mean, I was like walking up hills in our neighborhood, like power walking. I go on those same hills now and I'm out of breath, and I remember doing it then and I was like not out of breath at that point. I don't know, I feel like I'm in worse shape now, but anyway, so I felt really good, but I was doing everything that I could to try and naturally start labor. The only thing I didn't try, which I know it's kind of controversial, but I had heard about the midwife's concoction or whatever, where people take some kind of oil or something. I don't know. I've heard mixed reviews. Some people say it's horrible. Some people say it was awesome. It worked for me. I didn't do that. Part of me wishes I would have, but whatever. Can't change it. So Friday rolls around. We were scheduled to go into the hospital at 6 p.m. to get induced, and as just a little fun fact, I was not a very emotional pregnant lady. Like, I didn't really cry often. I'm not necessarily an emotional person in general. I have feelings, but I'm just not a big crier. But I got into the shower before we were supposed to go get induced on Friday night, and I just like started bawling. I was so sad because I just felt like my entire plan, everything that I thought would happen already, was just kind of starting to get out of my reach and out of my control. And it was sad, and I had a lot of anxiety going there. So yeah, I didn't really have a lot of peace about it, I guess. But whatever.
So here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Kendra was upset because I think both of us, but Kendra in particular with her personality, likes to have control over situations and things, and I think we had just done a ton of classes and a ton of preparation and that kind of stuff. So we very much felt like we had control, or at least throughout the pregnancy, we felt like we were going to have control going into the labor, and that we knew we had a plan. We're both big planners, so we knew like exactly how we wanted it to go. And this was kind of like that Friday night. Even when we left Wednesday, we were discouraged and frustrated, but we still thought, okay, we still have 2 more days. We just kept holding on to the hope that like.
Yeah, we really thought we wouldn't have to go get induced.
Because we're like, who makes it to 42 weeks? Like, everybody. Yeah. And so, like that Friday night, I think that's when it really accumulated for Kendra, and she just like was coming to the realization that we were going to have to get induced, and so I think that was just hard for her to take in. And so, yeah, for me, I'm just going to support her. I didn't particularly have my own opinions on the situation. Like, I'm just going to back whatever she does. So it didn't, like, personally, I wasn't upset, but I knew how upset she was and how, like, sad and frustrated it was making her. So I was feeling a lot of that for her. So both of us were, I don't want to seem like that's all it was. I mean, I guess you could speak for yourself, but for me, I was very excited because I knew, well, at least now we're going into the hospital, so by the end of this weekend, Monroe's going to be here. So I had a lot of that excitement,
Yeah.
But also just a lot of sadness for her for how it was playing out.
I mean, I was obviously excited. I don't know if it was my pride or if it was me losing control, but I just was so upset that it wasn't happening naturally, you know? So, and I kind of have anxiety about hospitals. I just hate hospitals. I hate getting my blood drawn. I hate any of that. Like, it's not that I don't have a high pain tolerance. It's just that hospitals freak me out. Even if they're the nicest nurses, I just don't feel comfortable. And so it was a big mess.
What's a big mess?
Okay. We go walk into the hospital totally normally, which I was not expecting that either. I always, like, you see in your head when you go to the hospital, you're going to be like, I'm having a baby, and you're freaking out, whatever. Brayden's running all over the place, and it wasn't. I walked in totally normal, sat down, was signing the papers, and it just felt so weird. Yeah, felt weird. But we got checked in, we got to our room, and there's a lot of things in my birth plan that I was super, particular on. Like, I didn't want to have to wear their little robe thing. I don't know why, I just didn't. It freaks me out. I just don't like it. So I had brought my own robe. I really didn't want to have any kind of like hep locks or needles or anything because that freaks me out too.
Kendra's fear of the hospital combined with her rebel mentality made her quite the patient at the hospital.
No, I wasn't rude.
No, she wasn't rude. She just wasn't going to do it their way.
Well, so we check in, we go to our room, and the nurse is like, okay, here's your robe, or whatever they call it. Put this on, and then I'll come back to do the hep lock. And I was like, and so right when she walked out, I just like was angry and sad and all of these things. And I just started crying again. And I was like, Brayden, I'm not putting on their robe. And he was like, okay, you don't have to. And so she walked back in, and I said, hey, I brought my own robe. Like, I'm not going to wear this one. And she kind of fought me on it a little bit. She just was like, well, you really need to wear ours. We really need access to your arm and to your whatever. And I just said, yeah, my robe will give you that. She's like, okay, fine. And so I put my robe on, and then she came back and said she was going to do the hep lock, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically an IV, but not, right? It's just like the needle in your, I know, never mind. I'm not going to talk about it. We hate needles, I told you.
Know what a hep lock is, Google it.
But be warned.
Don't Google image it. Ugh. It's really just a needle. It's not a big deal. We just don't like needles.
Yeah, we're just going to ask permission. Okay, so she comes back. She tells me she's going to administer the hep lock. I was upset about it. And then as we're like I was like sitting on the bed, and she was kind of just talking to me and going through my chart, whatever. Oh, then right when we get there, they check my fluids, and guess whose fluids were totally fine? Yeah, that made me so mad. I was like, Brayden, I'm leaving the hospital. But we were checked in, and it's fine. So then she's talking to me and she was like, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, at what pain will you want an epidural? And at this point I was crying because everything was just going wrong. And right then our doctor walked in and he was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Like, you're already upset? And the nurse was like, I think she's upset because I mentioned epidural. I think she's scared of the pain of the needle. And I said, no, that's not what I'm scared about. This is just going totally wrong. I don't even want an epidural, and I'm having to get induced. And anyways, the doctor just had a really good talk with us, and he was super personable. He just sat down on the bed and he's like, listen, I know that this isn't what you wanted, but this is kind of just an introduction to parenthood. Like, what did he say?
Yeah, he just gave us the whole pregnancy and your whole lives. Like, you've kind of always been able to control because it's just been you, and now for the first time you're losing control of a situation, and this is just a really good metaphor for parenthood and what you're about to experience for the next 20 years, because now all of a sudden there's like another human being that is not you, that you can't control. So parenthood is essentially you losing control and like learning how to maneuver that and handle that in the best way possible. And so he said it way more eloquently than I am saying it, but it was really good, and it was exactly what we needed to hear, and it was like super encouraging, I think, for me for sure, and I think for Kendra too.
Yeah, it was. And so then, thankfully, Brandon is not a confrontational person. He's a 9 on the Enneagram, if you are familiar with that. But I was so glad because at that point I wasn't even thinking about the hep block anymore. I kind of my mind was off of that. But after the doctor gave us his little speech, Brandon was like, okay, and does she have to have a hep block or an IV or anything like tonight? Can you just not do that? And he was super gracious and said I didn't have to, even though that was the hospital protocol. So I was so glad about that because it just gave me like, I sighed a breath of relief.
Oh.
Is that how you say it?
A sigh of breath of relief?
I sighed.
Oh, I sighed a breath of...
I sighed a breath of relief.
Yeah, nailed
So, okay. So, Saturday night, we started with one induction technique. I don't remember exactly which one it was. I'm not going to be super graphic on YouTube, but we started that, and the plan was that would be in for 12 hours, and then hopefully it would kickstart labor. If not, we would have to continue down the path of induction. So the next morning we woke up and hadn't really done anything. I was maybe half a centimeter dilated. I was like 80% effaced or something, but literally nothing had happened. Doctor checked us Saturday morning, and his shift was about to be up because they do 24-hour shifts or whatever. So he checked me, nothing had really happened. And he said, hey, I think we're gonna have to start Pitocin next, which I was really wanting to avoid Pitocin, so that was kind of disheartening. But whatever. He gets off the clock. The next doctor checks in. He comes into the room and he sits down, and one of the first things he says is, all right, so do you want to just go ahead and have a C-section? Just, go ahead and get the baby out? And at that point, I was just like, oh, what? And so I said, no, I feel like we haven't even done any induction techniques yet. Like, I would rather do Pitocin than just voluntarily have a C-section right now. He's like, okay, yeah, totally. I was just seeing where your head was at. Which, honestly, I think a lot of the doctors and nurses didn't think my body was ever going to go into labor, no matter how many induction techniques they tried, because I was 15 days late, although was my due date off? We'll never know. But I was late. My body wasn't really naturally going into labor. The first induction technique didn't really do anything. And so I think in the back of their mind, they all really just assumed I was going to have a C-section. So anyways, he said, all right, well, before Pitocin, there's another induction technique we can do, and we'll do that for 4 hours and see if anything happens. So fast forward, nothing really happened. At that point, he said, all right, we need to start Pitocin, which I don't know. I said, okay. So we started Pitocin, which is the devil's juice.
Don't recommend it. There is no swipe up link.
Yeah,
For Pitocin.
I will not do a swipe up link for Pitocin. I do not endorse this. So anyways, we start Pitocin, and in the beginning it was fine. Brandon and I were just kind of, they let me have a movable monitor or whatever. You know how they have the monitor over your belly to check the baby's heart rate? So they had one that I could move. So we were like walking up and down the halls, and I was just kind of walking around my room trying to do squats, doing whatever I could to kickstart stuff. And if you've had Pitocin before, then you know that every 15 to 30 minutes the nurse comes in and just cranks it up. So it gets pretty intense pretty fast. So the first couple hours were bearable. I definitely was feeling contractions, but it wasn't anything crazy. And then it started to get pretty intense the more they ramped it up. So I would say at this point we've been in the hospital 18 hours. And I'd been on Pitocin maybe 5 or 6 hours. The doctor came in and he wanted to try and break my water because he said that he thought that would kickstart things, which at first I had said no to, and then a couple hours into it I just was like, all right, I'll do it. So he tried to break my water. Very uncomfortable. And he basically said, oh, I think I got it. I'm pretty sure it's just going to be a slow leak, which use your imagination on what that means. A couple hours later, I was progressing a little bit, but really not as fast as they were wanting me to. So he checked my water again and realized it wasn't actually broke. So he legit broke it this time, which was good. That was kind of like a boost because he broke it and contractions were fairly close together. So he just was like, kind of got a new boost of energy. He's like, all right, we're going to have this baby tonight. Like, it may not be before midnight, but we're having the baby tonight. And so that was just in the back of my mind. And I was like, okay, this is good. Like, my body's doing what it wants to. The doctor is like pleased with my progress, which I was really worried about. I just kept in the back of my mind thinking, if I don't do this fast enough, like, they're going to want me to have a C-section. You know, it's such a mental game. And I just was kind of, part of the time I feel like I was in a good mental space, and then part of the time I just was so worried about what everybody else was thinking about me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which was a tricky place to be. Okay, so now you share when it got intense.
Yeah, I think after the water broke, that's when it got real intense. So that was probably like 6 or 7 p.m. And so then the contractions were like super consistent. Kendra had like the monitor behind her, so we could see the contractions coming. They were coming every 2 minutes. We could see, at this point they started getting, they have a graph that shows like the intensity of them as well, and you could see that they were like getting to the top of the chart. So they were kind of like maxing out the intensity on there, coming consistent every 2 minutes. So
for like 5 hours.
Yeah, so every book I had read and every class we took, this is like exactly where you want to be. This is like, it's happening. Like, she's definitely getting more dilated right now. We're laboring. This is exciting.
Our doula was in there, so she had like a medicine ball, a peanut ball, a little rebozo, if you know what that is.
If not, you should look it up. It's very nice.
Yeah, if you're pregnant, look into having a rebozo, or yeah, your husband like knowing what to do with the rebozo, because feels so nice.
Yeah, so it was really intense. So yeah, we labored like that for like several hours, and at this point, this is where it, like, I think for Kendra it started to like get painful, and like actual like real contractions where she's having to like breathe through them. And she put in her AirPods and had this little playlist that she put together, which was a beautiful collection of Christian music and hardcore rap.
And country.
And some country.
And The Greatest Showman.
Oh yeah, and The Greatest Showman. And at this point she was doing mostly like worship music and stuff, because we couldn't hear the music because she had her headphones in, but she was singing at the top of her lungs for all of us as she breathed through her contractions. So.
But I didn't know I was singing that loud.
Yeah. But it was me, her mom, and the doula in the room with her. And so that was a really cool experience. That was my favorite part of the labor, for sure.
Yeah.
It was just like, we were just actually doing it, and it was, I don't even know how to explain it, but just having her like sing worship music while she labored, there's just something that was like really special about that, and it was just like kind of all like had chills. It was just like one of those moments that was just like I'll always remember. It was really cool to be a part of.
That is just such a cool memory and like a beautiful experience. Like those 6 hours or whatever were just, that's like when it was like intense. Yeah, it was just so cool. And Brandon was the best partner and support. I mean, yeah, he just was like, anytime I moved, like he had a tennis ball and was like pushing pressure points on my back, or if I was like on all fours, he would do the rebozo, or
Use your imagination on that one if you don't know what the rebozo is.
Anyways, he was such a good partner, and
Sexual dance move.
I could not ask for, a better person to be in it with me. So, just a little for him.
Wow, thank you.
You're
That's so
welcome.
sweet of you.
So up until this point, I hadn't had any pain interventions. When I started Pitocin, I was about a centimeter dilated, and the last time the doctor had checked, which was maybe a couple hours after breaking my water, I was maybe a 3. So I wasn't progressing, honestly, as fast as they wanted me to, or I guess maybe as fast as a typical induction goes. I don't really know. But anyways, around midnight, he came to check me. So at this point, we had been in the hospital for about 30 to 32 hours. And he checked me, and I was maybe a 5 or a 6. And that was like after it had been all those hours of really intense contractions. And so I kind of felt a little bit defeated in that, because I really thought I was further along. And
also, he didn't come in and was like, all right, we're at a 6. He was like, ooh, we're only at a 6. Like, he was he wasn't excited about it.
Yeah, he just really, I just was so in my head about it, because I could just tell that and then right after that, he just said, listen, I have no doubt that you could do this naturally. Like, I understand you don't want an epidural, but I really am highly suggesting you consider it, and because you have to have energy to push. And at this point, you've been doing this for a long time. Your body's been working really hard. I know you don't want a C-section, and a lot of times when this happens, the person makes it to 10 centimeters and then they don't have the energy to push and have to have an emergency C-section. And it's just, anyways, he was just kind of saying all this stuff. And so again, in my head, I could tell he was kind of defeated. I could tell the nurses were kind of just assuming that I was going to have a C-section. And so Brandon and I just had everyone leave the room, and I just looked at him and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, now everything's going wrong. The only thing that I want is to have a vaginal birth. Like, that's the only goal that I have at this point. And so obviously he was super encouraging and just said, I will support whatever you want. If you don't want to get an epidural, like, I know you can do this. If you want to get one, that's fine. Like, I've seen how hard you've been working, and I know that you want to do it vaginally. And anyways, and obviously in the moment, you're not really processing a ton of stuff. You're just kind of taking the little bits of information you get and just trying to like process that. I feel like you can't really go too deep. So at that point, I just was like, okay, I'll get the epidural. I want to have energy to push, and I want to do this vaginally. So that's my goal. Which I did feel defeated making that decision, but Brandon went out, told the doctor, and at that point, it was such a mental game. So if you're pregnant, my advice to you is, number one, you can do this. You are so powerful and so capable, and our bodies were made for this. So don't let this story, I hope this story doesn't scare you, but don't let anyone else's story scare you. Like, every birth is different, and yours is going to be awesome. But if something doesn't go right, and a lot of times, like, it doesn't go exactly to your birth plan, it's okay. Like, if things have to go off course, that's fine. What matters is getting your baby here, and that's kind of what I had to come to terms with, is all I wanted was her to be healthy, and that was it. So do what you have to do, but don't beat yourself up, because I know it's easy to do, and honestly, like, I was feeling a lot of that in the moment of just defeated, because I knew I could do it. I had worked so hard and like prepared so much for this, and I just felt as if, yeah, I just felt defeated. But don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so my mental toughness was kind of gone, to be honest, because I knew I was getting the epidural. So at that point, I wasn't necessarily trying to work with the pain, because I knew pretty soon I wasn't going to feel anything. So we were waiting on the anesthesiologist to come in, and they had said, oh yeah, he'll be right in. So at this point, contractions are like on top, within, I don't know, a minute and a half to 2 minutes. Like, they're really close together.
Yeah, a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Maximum.
Super close together. And so
Super close. Super close.
anyways, so I was legit like falling asleep during, like, in between contractions, and then I'd wake up and be like, okay, and then I'd fall asleep and then wake up, and then after probably 10 to 15 minutes of that, I looked at Brandon and I was like, when is he going to be here?
Yeah, you would think that you go out and you say, all right, we want the epidural, and then they walk in with you and give you the epidural.
Well, because
But
that's
the
how they made
guy-
it seem. Like, they,
Well, and I think a lot of times it would take the guy like a few minutes to get the stuff ready, and then he'd be in and give you the epidural. But there was another lady next door having a C-section, and so he was currently doing her epidural, and there was something going on. They wouldn't really tell us any information, but he was basically in there, and they're like, we can't go in there. We don't know when he'll be out, but he should be out in just a few minutes. So in our mind, all right, we don't get it now, but we get it in just a few minutes.
yeah, so it just kept going and going, and then it was like 45 minutes later, and then Brandon walked out, and he was like kind of mad because he could see how much pain I was actually in, because I wasn't necessarily trying to like power through it anymore. And so he just walked out and he was like, ma'am. He wasn't rude, but he did get a little feisty. And so
Wasn't my best moment.
it's okay.
No, but also at this point, we've slept like 5 hours in the last 48 hours. Like, you have no sleep. Kid has been like laboring, like hardcore, doing hardcore work for like the last 8 hours. Like, everybody's exhausted.
Yeah, and we just, yeah. So finally the guy came in. He was kind of cold, to be honest. But I was like I was not happy that it was happening, but whatever. So he gave me the epidural, and basically they just said, all right, try and sleep for a couple hours. I think it was like 1:30 in the morning. So they're like, try and sleep, and we'll check you in the morning when the doctor does his rounds. And so I did sleep. I probably slept about 4 to 5 hours.
I slept about 6.
No, you slept till 6.
I slept about 7.
Yeah, Brandon was snoozing.
Your
in
boy
the
was out. They had
lazy
me in
boy.
a little Michael Scott chair at the end of the bed, and I was just curled up, out like a light.
Ah. Yeah, Brandon slept well. I just kind of kept like waking up, and I just was, my mind was wrestling with things. My mom and my doula actually were in there just like sitting in the chairs, which I kept telling them, go home, because they both, like, we live a mile away, so my mom could have came to our house. Our doula lived a mile away from the hospital as well, and I just felt so bad. I was like, y'all go home, don't sleep in this chair, like a horrible chair. But they just stayed because they were like, we don't know what's gonna happen. So anyways, I was kind of in and out, and the doula did have the peanut ball, and so I was able to kind of lay on both sides. That way I wasn't just laying flat, because I just didn't like the feeling. I hated not being able to move, and I just felt like I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing, So anyways, big mental game for me. So finally, it's the next morning, he comes to check, and I had maybe progressed like a centimeter, literally. Like, I had not progressed much, and then again, at that point, it was just kind of like, okay, this girl's probably gonna have a C-section. Like, the epidural is not relaxing her enough to progress her, and it just was a lot of things. And so when he left, he again was kind of like, not rude, but just wasn't pleased, I guess, that I hadn't progressed as much, and just assumed I would have a C-section. And so he left, and I remember just kind of praying, and I was like, okay, Lord, clearly this isn't going how I wanted it to, and it's out of my control. So I just like relinquish it to you. Please like cleanse the bitterness, cleanse the anger. Like I just want to enjoy the rest of this. And honestly, I feel like that just really changed things. Like I just was relaxed and I was like, okay, I got that epidural. Who cares? Like it is what it is. I just want my baby here and I want to be able to push her out. So the next, our second doctor, now his shift is over. So our third doctor comes for her shift, and she kind of walked in, and I had just been checked, which is when I had progressed maybe a centimeter. I had just been checked like an hour before. So she's like, I'm not going to check you right now. Like I know you just got checked. I'll come back in a couple hours and see how you're doing. And again, that was like right after I had prayed, and I just kind of realized, okay, this is a situation. I'm just going to deal with it. So she came back in a couple hours later and checked and was like, you're ready to push, which was just shocking because for so long it had been kind of every time they'd check, it was sort of like a negative outcome in a way, in the sense of I wasn't progressing as fast as they wanted. And so when she checked and said that, we all were just like, wait, what? And we all just kind of looked at each other. And she's like, yeah, you're ready to push. Like, I'll come back. She's like, do you feel like you have to poop? And I said, nope. She's like, oh, well, do you feel pressure down there? I was like, no, I don't. Like, I don't. And so she's like, okay, well, you're definitely ready. The nurse came in and wanted to do some practice pushes. And so I had Brandon on one side and my doula on the other, and I had my AirPod in, so I was listening to my playlist, and I could feel the contractions. And so I would tell Brandon, like, okay, I feel a contraction, like I'm gonna try to push. And which was really helpful, and that way it wasn't just them being like, okay, push, because I could feel one coming, and I kind of was able to maneuver that, I guess is the right word. And so the practice pushes, I guess, were good. I don't know if they say that to everybody, but she was like, this is great, you're doing awesome, like do that push again, do that push, whatever. And so at that point, I guess it turned from practice pushing to actually pushing. And okay, obviously you heard earlier that Brandon hates needles, very squeamish of stuff like that. And so I always assumed, like, I knew he would be a great partner during labor, but I just assumed he wouldn't want to necessarily like be involved and like be seeing everything, just because he doesn't really like blood. And I was fine with that. I'm like, you don't need to look down there. But this man was like, as close as the doctor was, he was like, had my leg, and it was great because he just was, every time I do a really good push, he'd be like, okay babe, that was great, like that was such a good push. Which, how could you even tell it was a good push?
I was just being encouraging. I was really just feeding off the other nurse's energy, and if she got really excited, then I was like, oh yeah, good push. I was watching her face to make sure that you were pushing good.
Okay. Well, but then I think once the head was like there.
Yeah, I mean, you could like see, so then after you pushed her like not very long, you could see her head and then like a little bit of hair and stuff. And so the baby's hair, not Kendra's hair.
Brandon!
Just kidding. But then once you could after you pushed, I could literally see her get like a little bit further out. So I could actually see that you were like making progress, which that was really cool. I was like, oh, this is actually working.
Yeah, Brandon was just like a hype man. He was like getting really excited, like as pushing went along. He just was super stoked. So anyways, I could feel after about 30 to 45 minutes, which honestly it did not feel that long at all. I could feel a ton of pressure down there, and I just knew her head was there. And she was like, her head's here, do you want to touch it? I'm like, nope, I don't want to touch it. Like, I just want to get the baby out. And she's like, okay, are you sure? I think they asked me 3 separate times if I wanted to touch her head. And I was like, no, I don't want to touch her head. I just want to get the baby out. Anyway, so pushing lasted a total of maybe an hour and a half. It felt like 20 minutes. It just, I don't know, I feel like it didn't.
Yeah, the pushing was really fast.
Yeah, it went really fast. So anyways, right before then also they had told us, hey, just as a warning, she is 15 days past her due date. We don't know what the placenta looks like. We don't know how much nutrients she's been getting. So she may be purple, like we may have to take her right away, which I wanted to do skin to skin right away. So they're like, we may have to take her right away and just make sure everything's good. So we're just warning you about that. And so I kind of had that in the back of my mind, just praying like, oh, I just want to be able to hold my baby. So anyways, I remember it's just towards the end of the pushing, and I could feel her head being right there, and we just like did a couple more pushes, and she came out. They put her on my chest, and I remember the doctor being like, she's good, like she's healthy, she's totally fine, and that was super reassuring to know that they didn't have to take her. So we did skin to skin for about an hour, and then if you've seen my Instagram post, you know that Brandon was really intense when he packed his hospital bag, like board shorts in case he thought we were gonna be in the shower laboring, which was the plan, but as you know, our plan didn't necessarily pan out. Anyways, he brought board shorts. He had his little button-up flannel so he could just like rip it off whenever he wanted to. So I think like right when Monroe was born, he like took his shirt off because he knew skin to skin was important. So he was like walking around without his shirt on. What, babe? It's adorable.
Yeah.
It's not.
I was cooler than that, okay?
That is cool. He ripped it off and was ready for skin to skin as soon as he could. So anyway, she was on me for a bit, and then Brina was able to hold her, and she got weighed. She was 6 pounds 15 ounces, so pretty small for a 15-day overdue baby. But it just was such a sweet time, and it was, yeah, like the first week of her life. We had to stay in the hospital for 24 hours after she was born, just because that's standard. You can't leave sooner than that. But
Kids are checked out the minute after.
at hour 22, I was like, bags packed, standing ready, like, when am I leaving this place? I've been here for 4 days and I want out. Which was funny because I remember a couple of the nurses being like, do you guys want to stay an extra day? I'm like, no, I want to go home. Yeah, so literally like 24 hours and 2 minutes, I think we were walking to the car. First week of her life is probably one of my favorite weeks ever. It just was so sweet to be home and to finally have her here and just be getting to know her, and I don't know, it just was the coolest. It was just my favorite week ever. Like, we had the best friends bring us the yummiest food, so I just didn't have to worry about anything. I did have to wear a diaper around if you had a baby, you feel me? That was a little uncomfortable. But overall, it just, I don't know, it was the best experience. And even though it went 180 from what we planned, I still loved it. So that is my encouragement to you guys. Just know that even if your birth does not go according to your plan, you can still fully enjoy it. And that, I really can say that. I know that I had bitterness and anger and frustration like in the hospital a couple of times, as I mentioned, but I really was able to just embrace it and enjoy it for what it was, and the memories are just, I don't know, I just love them, and I will do it again in a heartbeat. I'm excited for the next time. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm praying that I don't have to get induced next time, but if I do, and if our next birth goes exactly the way Monroe's did, which everyone's different, so it won't, but even if it did, I would still love it, and I would probably enjoy it even more, just knowing what the outcome is. So just know that, how, like I said, however you bring this baby, your baby, into the world, so beautiful. Women are so strong. We can do it. If you're pregnant, just continually tell yourself, my body was made for this. I can do this. No matter what happens, you are a warrior.
And to the 7 guys watching this video, you can do it too. You guys are awesome supporters, and we're strong too.
Yeah, honestly, having him is just like, oh, it was amazing. I couldn't have done it without him.
Wow, thank you. I can do anything without you too.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you for watching this. I know we're long-winded, but thank you for listening. Honestly, we wanted to make this so that we can go back and look at it later on in life and just remember, because there's already so many details we forgot, and it's only been 6 months. So I know in a couple years we'll love being able to reminisce on all of this and the emotions. I hope we answered all of your questions, and I hope you enjoyed.